Here it is. Messi! Couldn't have been any other way! Magnificent!
Today, I'm talking with my good friend, Dr. Austin Maxheimer. And it's a little bit different today. We recorded this in person inside of a church building, which we explain fairly early on in the conversation. But it's also the location of the Open Table church service that I had mentioned participating in with Austin and Perry in a previous conversation, and I'll link that below. Austin and I talk about his journey in church over the last 4 decades and how it has formed him as a person, as a man, a father, vocationally, and even as a grandfather to be. And if you want to see something extra fun, you can watch us hug each other at the very end of the video. Shout out to my friend Thomas Grimm for filming and editing this video for me so I can get it out more quickly. This was just recorded a couple of days ago. And without further ado, conversation on neighborhoods and Jesus with Dr. Austin Maxheimer. Oh, and if you don't see the resemblance to the GOAT, Lionel Messi, I don't know what to tell you.
So I'm here with Dr. Austin Maxheimer. I love to call you doctor. How long have you officially been a doctor, a D-min?
Yes, I got my doctorate of ministry in 2020, May of 2020. So right
You really
in
call it 2020? You're not a 2020 guy? It's okay. Just
I
a
never
quick judgment.
thought of that. I think
2020. The first time you say it, it's 2000. The second time, it's 20.
I think I normally say 2020. I don't know.
It's more prestigious, just like your title.
Yeah, that's
The
right.
doctor.
Yeah, doctor.
Yeah. The good doctor.
It's a good doctor.
So you are now a doctor.
Yes.
Now I'm thinking of that joke about like the airplane. It's like, is there a doctor in the plane?
That is, I would keep my hand out in that context.
So when you try and describe to people like either your degree or area of focus, your academic area of focus or continued interest, like what are the kinds of things that you start to say? Like me asking right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say this might be the first time I've done it. So honestly, I don't really talk about my doctoral work much. It was the decision to do doctoral work was more about me just continuing to learn, to be a lifelong learner. It wasn't necessarily to get prestige, or I wasn't planning on going on to pursue higher education, which a lot of people that need that PhD or doctorate to teach in college, and I just didn't have any interest in that. In fact, I had failed in something that I was very passionate about, which was activating small groups of Christians to be more missional in the community, in the city, to create what I would call kingdom or gospel transformation. And so,
what was your academic level at that point?
Master's.
Okay,
I did have an MDiv, Master Divinity. So I have a Master Divinity and a Doctorate of Ministry.
Gotcha.
Both of which are completely useless in day-to-day life. So I had that kind of initiative that we had led had a spectacular failure. And so after resting for a couple of years, I actually saw a cohort that Asbury Seminary was piloting. I thought through Twitter or X, and they said, we're launching a pilot cohort in activating missional communities, which is exactly in line with what we were doing and trying to do.
This was just after the spectacular failure?
Like after a year, almost a year and a half of kind of resting
and you're
in
healing
that failure.
and sure.
Healing.
Okay.
And the visiting professors were two guys named Alan Hirsch and Michael Frost, who had been very formative in my thinking.
Wow.
And so I was like, sure, let's go for it. So yeah, I jumped right in. It was really trying to learn more and get better at my leadership.
I feel like I need to give some folks a little more context on.
Yeah, we jumped right in.
We did jump right in, which is great. So we started a little bit with like kind of who you are, and we're going to spend a lot of time on who you are and how you live.
Yeah.
But let's also like say like, where are we right now?
Yeah.
Like we chose this spot in particular.
We
so
did.
where are we?
We did. We are in a building called Potter's Wheel, which is an old Presbyterian church built in the end of the 1800s. And it is sitting smack in the heart of what is called the south side of Evansville, which geographically speaking is on the south side of the town. But
well named.
Yeah. But it is also in the heart of what we would call in our line of work a disinvested neighborhood. So a neighborhood that has experienced decades upon decades of systemic issues, generational poverty, those sorts of things. And so it's sitting right in the heart of that. And so a guy, a follower of Jesus named Mike Ballard, had taken over this space. And had been
it had
operating.
already ceased being a church at that point,
Correct.
Right.
Yeah,
so the church closed
Yep.
some point in the past.
But they moved out in the suburbs, I
didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the story of many of what you'd maybe call center city or inner city churches.
So by saying the church closed, it was congregating in this building.
Correct.
Ceased, and a newer building in the suburbs in a different part of town continued on,
where the
which
people
made this,
were going.
Okay, great.
Building suburbs. They
And this
followed
is
the people.
This real estate is something that became available and was still in usable condition.
Yeah, very usable. And this guy named Mike Ballard, he was actually leading and pastoring a church out in the suburbs, but he wanted to do ministry back this way, and so he'd started something called Potter's Wheel Ministry. The short version of the story is it's been now reutilized as a nonprofit space where the organization just follows kids in the neighborhood from cradle to career, ensuring that they have a promise to walk with them cradle to career, be successful and flourishing in life. But while it might have some meaning for us, is that there has also been a kind of a different expression of church out of here called Open Table Church, very non-traditional kind of church plant. And I am part of the core leadership team there, and you are a semi-regular attender.
A little more than Christmas and Easter.
Yeah, a little more
but
than
not...
that. Maybe not part of the core group.
Sure.
But you are there. In fact, we were here 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Fellowshipping together.
So we are recording on a Tuesday, and this place still functions as this support and gathering for this nonprofit organization. So it's a Christian-based nonprofit organization, but not a ministry of a church.
Correct.
Is that accurate? Okay.
Yeah.
However, on Sundays, there is also a church that utilizes this space.
There's actually two of them.
Two churches.
Marshallese
That's right. So
well.
it's sort of in the midday, there's the Open Table Church, and in the afternoons, there's a church. And is it, do those churches rent it, or is it sort of like a gift an expression of the nonprofit wanting to utilize its building 7 days a week, or
yeah, I
something
don't know.
like
We'd
that?
have to ask Chris about the Marshallese Church, but Open Table Church does not pay rent. The director of the nonprofit is part of the core group of leadership. They wanted to see the way she described it was a worshiping community and utilize this physical space. She wasn't necessarily calling it a church or a church plant at that time. She just kind of had this envision or heart for a worshiping community to utilize this space that was for a place where neighbors could connect and come and walk to. And so that was kind of the impetus or catalyst.
And maybe where I'm going with this is clear to people who are watching already, but I just want to draw attention to the fact that this is almost like the opposite of the criticisms that a lot of churches will receive of it's this place that almost exclusively exists for a single day a week, sometimes 2 days a week, and then is largely empty and underutilized other days a week.
Yeah.
Plenty of examples of churches that have ministries that utilize the space, but this is almost like this opposite thing where it's like the space exists to be utilized, in this case, under the, ownership and stewardship of a nonprofit, and then happens to feature a gathering that people might recognize more like a church.
Correct.
So what I thought would be interesting is either starting there or even going back to some of your stuff with Lampstand is, let's go all the way back. Because well, I think what would be helpful to know is at some point in your progression as a follower of Jesus, non-traditional expressions of church became something you were called to.
Yeah.
And not just called to participate in, but called to like lead if appropriate.
Yeah.
But you didn't start out that way. Take us back as far as you want of like, when did church become a part of your life and how?
Well, church was always part of my life. I would say that my desire to participate and lead alternative expressions of churches started with the first time I smoked weed.
All right, let's dive in.
No, so I grew up. My dad was a minister, youth minister. So
you really were born into a church.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I didn't have a bad experience. I know a lot of people have bad experiences, especially pastors' kids. And I didn't. I always felt very loved, but I was a very curious person, and I smoked weed for the first time in 8th grade. Set me down a pathway of exploring life. What does Jamie Wheel talks about? The hedonistic calendar. I was an adherent to that sort of mindset. So
can I double click on that real quick? Are these the types of people you hang out with? Were these also church people, or did you
Some
have?
Of them.
Okay, so there was. It wasn't necessarily these are my rebellious friends. I have my church friends and my hedonistic exploration friends. The Venn diagram overlapped a bit.
Oh, big time.
Okay,
overlapping all over the place, and so. And I was also an athlete, so I was very active in that sense. And so it's just like, I don't know, it's just, Venn diagram is a good way to put it. A lot of overlapping spaces and relationships. But I spent about 10 years like partying, in the party scene and exploring all sorts of things. And, went off to university. And
can I double click on the partying a little bit too? Just
sure.
Because you know some of my story, and I've shared some of my story, but like when I was in junior high and high school and stuff, part of what was a game changer for me was sort of changing my behaviors to kind of match what I saw as what a follower of Jesus might do. Were there any things that you kind of said, hey, these are sort of out of bounds because I'm a Christian? Like how much did your identity as a Christian influence behaviors at that time before you got into college?
Man, that's a really difficult question to answer because, it's on hindsight, it's so much easier to explain things. But when you're explaining things on hindsight, I don't know that it's necessarily true to your lived experience in the moment. And so I would say, as best as I can approximate, I truly lived the secular sacred divide. Like, this kind of enlightenment, spiritualness is upper story, realness is lower story thing. I of course didn't articulate that then.
Sure.
But like, I didn't feel hypocritical in my lifestyle. I would party Friday and Saturday and then be at church on Sunday, and I would participate fully in both of those things. And I personally never felt hypocritical. But I would say that absolutely morally, there were lines that were drawn that were informed by my upbringing and religious background, so it's kind of difficult to know exactly where to draw those lines and how they're informed. But
let me ask it a different way too. How aware were your parents of whatever behaviors, partying and whatnot that
they were willfully ignorant or blind. I mean, I did get kicked out of school once for smoking weed, and they obviously knew and found out about that.
Do you think that they like looked at you as like, man, Austin's a mess. We hope he gets his act together, or was it more like
no? Because
Austin's great.
Yeah, I mean, because in a lot of ways, I was there at church on Sunday, and I did live a relatively, from the outside, moralistic life, and I was well liked and loved, and I didn't step into addiction or over abuse. I was always able to turn it off, whereas like my brother couldn't turn it off. I still was performing on sports teams and getting good grades. So
Sure.
I don't think there was, even though I was a pretty heavy partier, I wouldn't say that there was really concern from my parents.
Okay, now,
yeah, back
where
to,
you were going to go going to school.
Yeah, so I was through I was exploring lots of not just hedonistic type of pursuits, but I was also philosophical pursuits, and I went to IU and got exposed to a whole nother ways of thinking about life and.
And your major, what your career path was clear at this point? Your major,
no.
Okay. So what major did you declare, or
I always just say I majored in partying. So I was up at IU just because that's what you did. You went to high school, you went to university, right? So, but I wasn't studying anything in particular. I was just there to be there. I was there because that's what you do in cultural America.
Was ministry even like an option in the back of your mind based on your father's path?
No. And at that point, I had set aside now by the time I was at IU, I had really set aside the faith of my youth. And so I wasn't following Jesus, or
no one was checking to see if you were going to church on Sundays.
Right.
It was party Friday, party Thursday, maybe.
Thursday,
party
Thursday.
Sunday, perhaps.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Okay. So there is a little bit of an inflection point
for sure
during those IU years.
Yeah,
okay.
An exposure to philosophers and ways of thinking that I hadn't been exposed to and was not ready to incorporate and integrate into my life and faith. And so it was really easy to set Christianity as a cultural practice or a religious system aside. But I wasn't negative towards it. I wasn't antagonistic or hostile.
You didn't declare yourself an atheist in a philosophy class one day and flip off your father from Bloomington or something like that.
In fact, all these years later through Christian Smith's work and others, it's kind of understood now that Christianity, historically speaking, the benefits that it's given science and our societies and the American government, like we understand now the Christian way it's informed and the benefits that it's given us as a society. Well, like I think I gleaned some of that. Like I definitely was not antagonistic towards Christianity, but I also wasn't certainly not practicing Christianity, and I don't think I would have called myself a Christian at that point in life.
Wow.
But the reason why I mention all this is because you were talking about, different expressions of churches. Well, when I did come to belief as a 24-year-old, 25-year-old, my heart was oriented towards those people that I had just spent 10 years partying with, that I had spent 10 years of enjoying life with. Yeah, well, I didn't think of them that way.
Yeah.
But
your people.
Oh man, people I loved so much and enjoyed, and I just wanted the gospel as it had revolutionized my life and awakened my mind. I wanted that same gift to be known by my friends. They were my friends, right? And people that had also thought this way. And so, can
you take a little bit of time to go into that conversion moment, however you call it, the enlightening? What words would you use, and give us a little more of the context of that moment when you were 24?
I can, yeah. So when I got married, which was a very disruptive life situation. So I went from single, living in Colorado, probably going to the Peace Corps, maybe going to the off-ski season in New Zealand, to married with a kid, 3-year-old. That transition happened in 4 months. So it was like major disruption. Wow. And then this woman that I happened to be married to was a Christian. And I was like, whoa, like she really is a Christian. Like she's praying and incorporating her faith on a Tuesday night. Like it was not just this religious game or system or.
And were these aspects of her more clear and explicit before you got married, or was it really like sort of after you were married and,
it was so
the commitment
fast.
had happened? Okay,
Like,
so it's
I mean, we certainly talked about it, but when you're talking about 4 months, that drastic of a life change and falling in love in a relationship and all this, it was stark. It was a realization like, oh, this is real, when it was married and we're 4 months in and this isn't going away and it's not a...
And it wasn't some sort of ultimatum that she had given you of if you want to marry me, these are my terms, and you will be converting inside of a few months, something like that.
No,
this just happened to be the true expression of her faith that you then got to witness and experience, and then.
So it was because of that reality of like being married to someone who has a very sincere and active faith of like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to like revisit this again. If I'm going to be married to her indefinitely, I got to figure out what's going on here. So I started reading the Bible again on my own for like the first time in my life. I was reading books like Mere Christianity and Total Truth that were just like these books. I had never been exposed to these books before. Some of Ravi Zacharias' book, which you can let's not go there,
but we'll bleep that out.
But I was given a lot of literature to read just on my own, and I was working second shift, so I had a lot of time in the mornings.
Right. So vocationally, you were working at a ski resort or
well, I was before we got married, but
and then but vocationally you weren't in ministry or education at that point, right?
No.
So intellectually, spiritually, academically, these are the things you started to be drawn to at that time. But that's not what you're doing as a vocation or a calling just yet.
My job was I was a community inclusion specialist for developmentally disabled adults.
Okay.
So it looked like going to baseball games, movies, Catholic mass, which I took. They were all Catholics, and so I would take them to mass every Sunday.
Okay.
Which was my first exposure and experience to liturgy and to that whole belief system, and it was beautiful. Like we were in church buildings that were even more beautiful than this, like and like the emphasis on like transcendence and how it draws you up, the architecture, like the stained glass windows. It was a powerful experience for me, and one that I believe now, God used to draw me to Himself. But I wasn't processing any of that at that time.
No. So you're having a kind of an individual, if I'm projecting, Zach Parsons projects.
Yeah.
So you're having kind of an individual / married sort of relationship conversion experience to where you're seeing it in her, you're processing things from reading them on your own.
Mm-hmm.
But you did have this exposure through your job to some things with Catholic ministry and liturgy. And then take your time to get there, but I also want you to hit on when sort of like church started to become a part of that.
Yeah. So my wife was also part of a small group, which I had never heard that term at that point in life. So a small group, for those who may not be steeped in church culture, is you have the large gathering on Sunday, and then through the week, a smaller group of 8, 10, 20 Christians will meet in someone's living room.
Was she attending the Sunday service and the small group, or just the small group?
She was attending both.
Okay.
And I was attending Catholic Mass through my work with these developmentally disabled adults, and then also attending small group whenever I wanted to.
Okay.
Because I was still very much exploring. So then it started to sort of, I was starting to have some faith conversations. Actually, it was people in that small group who were giving me these books.
Okay.
You probably can relate to now well-meaning Christians like, here, read this.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I got this book I want you to read. But I did, and I was reading it, and man, I look back and I'm like, wow, I'm so grateful they gave me these books. Could you imagine, like, if someone would have given me, I don't even know, like a John MacArthur book or something like that, like some religious, like, systematic, like, theology, like, these were beautiful books people were giving me, and I was just devouring them, and, just having a wonderful time exploring these thoughts and ideas. And so that was about a 1.5 year burn, though. That's, it was a long, slow process. But I do remember there was this moment though, as many people have. So I had came back to Evansville to party for 4th of July weekend like I normally did. So start drinking at 10 a.m., stop at 2 p.m. at 2 a.m.
Sure.
Just drink all day, partying with my friends, having a blast 4th of July. I remember doing that and then waking up the next day and having the immediate thought, that's not me anymore.
Wow.
And so then I realized that what the Bible or Scripture calls the flesh, like I had a conversion. That was it was like I had watched my flesh that was not my true identity anymore do these things. And I don't even necessarily think that they were necessarily bad things. I'm not trying to say, I don't want to get into, it's funny how it happened after a night of drinking. It's like, but it's not like this. I don't think I had this like immoral, wild thing. Like, but it was just this thing of like, that's not me. That wasn't me anymore. And I realized in that moment that I had, I guess, a conversion experience. I was baptized when I was 8. I don't want to let other people debate that sort of stuff. But for me, I was like, oh, I am a follower of Jesus now. I had this flip into Jesus as Lord of my life.
So did that, I don't even know what day of the week or what year that was, did that what were some of the other things that started to change in your rhythms of life and practice of community after that moment or in those next few months and years?
Well, I'm an all-in type of guy, and that was 4th of July, the 5th of July, and so I was enrolled in seminary and taking classes by September.
So this shift wasn't just something for your soul to where you could continue down sort of the vocational path you were on. You were like, speak a little more about how so was this for vocation or this is still for curiosity?
I was studying for the LSAT. So my plan was to go to law school. That was the plan.
And so you knew that was off the table, or that was still maybe on the table and you could pursue the seminary?
No, very much still possibly on the table. I just knew that I'd had this conversion moment. Jesus was Lord of my life. I needed to learn more. And so in our Western thoughts, I had, where do you go learn?
College.
Yeah. So I immediately enrolled in seminary. Now, again, on hindsight, it was a beautiful time. I greatly enjoyed. It sounds so silly now of like, I didn't have to enroll in an MDiv program to learn about God. But that's just what I thought, like I need to go learn more.
Well, and there seems to be a lot more resources online, even.
Well, true.
This is what, 12 years ago?
No, this is like 2005 or 6.
Oh, okay.
2006 maybe.
So almost a couple decades now.
Yeah.
So the resources, I mean, was YouTube even a thing back then?
Oh, I'm sure it probably existed, but I
Someone's
certainly
ability
wasn't watching it.
to be an autodidact or to do their own research, for better or worse.
Podcasts with Jordan Peterson and Jamie Wheel.
Yeah. Like all of that stuff has changed, dramatically. So I totally understand that path you go down. So so that's kind of an academic thing, which opens up into some more vocation options. And I'm going to keep trying to take you back to church. So how, are you starting to go on Sunday mornings to the same church as your wife?
So we uproot the whole family, move to the town where the seminary was in Lincoln, Illinois, and we spent 4 years in a bubble. But it was a bubble that I needed. It was a bubble that our family needed. And yes, we were experiencing all things. I mean, we were completely and totally saturated in Christian community. Like we lived in a housing complex for married students with kids. It was like a little commune almost. We were also part of the first time that I would call like a real small group, where we didn't call it that. We just gathered and we were totally and fully integrated in one another's lives. And it was a beautiful thing because there was no leader. It was just a group of us, about 8 to 10 of us, that were just living out our faith together. And it was just great. We shared meals together, shared life together.
That's what I was going to ask you. It involved meal sharing.
Absolutely. Yeah, music. Creating music is the first time I made music with other people.
Really?
So those of us who wanted to make music together, we would show up 30 minutes before.
What day of the week was this?
It changed over the years. I think at one point it was on Sunday, and then it was like Thursday nights, and then, but we were truly involved in each other's lives fully. As
you would get coffee, you would watch each other's kids, you
have
would
conversation. Yeah, absolutely.
Gotcha.
But then we were also attending a Sunday service in a church on Sundays, and so I just never found a lot of life there. But it was what it was, and we did that.
I did always kind of wonder sort of how, because of how I've seen your expression of church, we'll call it that, be somewhat. It's almost like there's two expressions of Austin. This is me projecting on you again, so you can
go ahead.
Clarify that there's I am a part of a traditional service, and I am a part of this sort of like rogue, renegade, experimental, avant-garde, like expression of church at the same time. And COVID. I don't want to fast forward all the way, but like COVID allowed you to do some clarifying things. You've reached a terminal, degree at that point, and gathering in person is now prohibited. So you have to sort of decide how you're going to continue to express church. So you don't have to jump all the way up to there. I just wanted to sort of call that out as something that now, as you're even describing this, like you went on Sunday mornings, didn't feel a lot of life, but you had a lot of life in this small group. So Lincoln, that's a 4-year experience for your family.
Yeah.
And then where do you go from there?
Well, we launched Lampstand, which was a house church network, which was what brought us back to Evansville. But maybe we'll take a path. So one of the things that's been very formative to me in following Jesus is this small little phrase in one of the Gospels. It says that and Jesus went and taught in the synagogue, as was his custom. So when you think about it in their context, the synagogue was the inset religious system. So we also see Jesus going to the temple. And that was the Jewish religious system of which Jesus was part, that he was born into. All right. But the vehicle that he used for transformation was his discipling community, or the 12 disciples that he called out by name to be with in special relationship. And so we see this dynamic that Jesus, it was his custom. He didn't forsake the inset religious system of his day. He participated in it. He was there. He was present. Yeah. He even affirmed it, you would say, in some sense, through his presence. Yeah. Yet when he wanted to make real change, when he wanted to bring about revolution, when he wanted to see the gospel be carried into the lived experience of people's lives, he started and shaped and formed an alternative community. Okay? So I picked up on that pattern right away with some helpful thoughts, from other thought leaders. And so a lot of Christians are born into the inset Western religious systems, right? Like the Sunday-centric, I call it the black hole of need. Sunday morning, organizational, institutional, denominational church. I feel like if I'm going to be true to following Jesus as naively as I can, I don't want to forsake that. I want to keep being there. I want to keep having a presence there. I want to keep making sure I have relationships there. But if I actually want to experience the kingdom, the gospel, the good news of Jesus, and to see that reproduced and multiplied into the world in transformative ways, I have to seek out these alternative expressions, or what some people call missional communities, or what we called through Lampstand as house churches.
Yeah. So that's good. So that Lampstand is, you're getting done at Lincoln. How do you decide where to go next? And then why Lampstand versus starting or joining? Surely you could have been hired on, at some church with that kind of degree and age and need and connections that you had through Lincoln. Why that path over the other?
I had zero desire to work at a traditional church. It was actually quite a revelation to me to realize that 95% of my peers that I was studying with in my MDiv program were vocational ministers. I was that kind of naive and ignorant. I truly just went to go learn more about God. Where do you do that at school, right? So I was just taking seminary to do that. And so I had no desire to do. In fact, one of the thought leaders that was very formative in me was Francis Schaeffer, and he started L'Abri. You know, he had a house up in the Swiss mountains, and people, you know, long-haired hippies would come and just study under him, and they'd have conversations, and they'd sit Indian style on rugs and meditate. But then, you know, there was one video of his when he talks about how shall we then live, where he's up in a tree. He's just doing a video up in a tree with knickers on. And it's like,
exactly.
I was like, this is the guy I want to. No, so I don't know. I thought maybe we would do a kind of L'Abri style house on a college campus. You know, just be a space and place where people could belong and feel loved, but then also have conversations about things of faith and philosophy. That was kind of the thought at the time. I don't know, you know, like for whatever reason or all the reasons, I just didn't want anything to do with the traditional route. I just didn't see life there. And so just wanted to kind of launch these alternative expressions of churches. Plus, you know, I like starting things.
Now,
I learned about myself. I'm a pioneer.
Yeah, like, definitely a pioneer. Now, Lampstand, was it something that had already been launched other places and you were sort of part of a plant here in this community, or was that this community's Lampstand expression the first expression of Lampstand?
No, it's all made up in myself. That's the other thing, is I also fashioned myself way back then as being a very original thinker.
Okay.
I never would have deigned to do something that someone else was doing.
Gotcha.
I'm gonna start this bad boy from scratch. You know, like I've softened a lot and become a lot wiser on that now, and appreciate the wider gifts of humanity. Working harder or smarter, not harder, all that stuff. But no, Lampstand was something we completely just created on our own.
What year are we talking about now?
This is 2010.
Okay.
Yeah. Certainly.
There's another church that started in 2010.
Yeah, which we ended up joining with. So, yeah.
Okay, so 2010, you feel called back to this community. What reasons? Family?
It was the closest thing that I would call what other people call supernatural. I don't believe in supernatural. That's maybe another discussion. Theologically, I don't think anything is supernatural. But anyways, yeah. So what other people would call supernatural. So I was praying fervently because we had, to use Christian lingo, a door was closed.
Read into that what you will.
Insider gift. So I, for whatever reason, I had really had a lot of proficiency in the original biblical languages, and so we pursued this track to do pioneer Bible translators to go globally and learn to translate the Bible. And I was really excited about doing that. But by virtue of my daughter, my oldest daughter actually being my stepdaughter, that we would have had to go live with her father for 3 months of the year. And my wife wasn't ready to do that. I mean, and I wasn't either. We didn't want to be without our daughter for 3 months in a chunk, you know. So anyways, that door was closed, if you will. And so I was praying fervently every day in the library through and after my studies, my last semester of study. And in one prayer time, I was getting flashes of real people's faces in my mind. Again, the only thing that closest to what I've ever experienced personally to a supernatural experience. So these flashes of faces, and they were all people that were I had grown up with or partied with, and all of them had a link back to Evansville. And so I was just like, we don't know what we're doing. Let's just move back to Evansville. Let's start these alternative expressions of churches or house churches or missional communities, and let's do ministry where these people could possibly connect, you know, because they're not coming through a traditional church doors. They're not ever going to come through that way. They're never going to hear the good news of Jesus in that sense. They're not going to sit through all these awkward customs and, you know, all this sermon where someone's talking at you for 40 minutes, some stranger that has no...
And there's a reason that we're sitting down here in the pews for this conversation and not, you know, up on the stage, which we'll share a picture of the stage at some point when we publish it as well. So at that point, when you launch this, since I'm drawing these two things, so there's Austin's participation in the traditional church and Austin's participation in the rogue church. At this point, you're just in the rogue church world?
No, not at all.
You still, okay.
So we did a house church network, and we encouraged our house churches to go wherever they wanted on Sunday mornings, because I refused to have Sunday services because, again, I call them black holes of need, and they just suck all of the light and kingdom resources into them. But the people that put them on mean well, and they are trying their best to live out faithfully. But so we just encourage people, you don't have to attend a Sunday service somewhere to be a part of our house church network. But if you want to, you can go and participate in it. And we did as a family. We just visited a lot of different churches, just building relationships and networking. Just experiencing other denominations and traditions of church. That's what we would do on Sunday morning.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, we still, as was his custom, we still went to Sunday morning church.
Okay, so how long did it last, and when were some of the inflection points that you remember until it stopped lasting?
Yeah, I always say our house church network was so successful that we grew it from 2 down to 1. Which is going to be a reoccurring theme. I don't know how long we've got on this.
2 people to 1 person?
No, 2 churches to 1.
Gotcha, okay.
I
thought you said it was your wife and it was just you.
No, although that's not too far from the truth. Not to get into all the things, but basically we operated Lampstand for 2 years, and it was good. There was a lot of learnings from it. We did start immediately with 2 after our formations, grew down to 1, and that was just a strategic decision to get healthy. We got back to 2, and we're getting ready to launch our 3rd house church, and we had plans and designs for network, and things were good. We got it to a healthy place. But we had been connected to a larger church plant in 2010 called One Life Network. It was growing very fast, and there was this desire, it's always been my desire, to see kind of this revolution happen. And so I was just drawn to the explosive growth, not just numerical growth, but just the growth of One Life as a church. And so we ended up, through a longer story, joining our small and fledgling house church network with this very larger, fast-growing church planting network. And we kind of integrated our 2 visions to work together.
So the Rebel Alliance is absorbed by the Empire.
Yeah, we did. You can call it selling out if you want. Is that what you're trying to say?
No. Well, and so like I've known you as somebody. You've even described it here as you make your decisions thoughtfully, but then you go all in, and then you
absolutely
learn and reflect, and then you may make another decision, but you do it with all of you.
Yeah.
So how would you describe that sort of next? So I've teased this sort of like COVID moment. So take us from that moment, that season, up to maybe COVID.
Okay, I'll try to go as fast as possible.
No. Take your time.
So as we joined with them, the hope was that we would match our kind of missional community desire with this larger church, attractional church that was bringing a lot of people into it. And
just one clarification that I started down the path before.
Yeah.
Now, vocationally, at this point, are you hired on as a pastor? Okay, so
not quite yet.
So you are bivocational.
I was selling carpet.
Selling carpet,
flooring. Okay. A lot of it was carpet. Selling flooring. Let me tell you, that's what I was doing at the time. So the hope was to kind of wed this kind of like attractional with this relational, missional, and see if we can fit them together, and that one could feed, and they could feed each other.
Okay.
And so to that end, I did end up coming on staff there to lead their life group ministry, the small groups I mentioned earlier. Under my leadership and direction, and what I felt like calling from the Lord was to pivot our small group expression to be more missional, to not just see our Christian communities, our small groups, as holding tanks for Christian community, not just meeting in people's living rooms, but actually taking the Christian mission of transformation of our individuals, our neighbors and neighborhoods, to take that into the city and bring about gospel transformation, using small groups as a decentralized vehicle for that happening. And there's a lot more, of course, that we could talk about there. The initiative started out great, did not end great. which brings us to what we had talked about, that learning moment, decision moment of wanting to learn, having the D-Min opportunity. So I spent about a couple years healing from that failed initiative, and then 4 more years learning, and I was ready to activate missional communities, and COVID. So that takes us to where we are.
So I want to pull to another like sort of bifurcation, is that you are very much an active, roll up your sleeve, boots on the ground, with people kind of person, and someone who can put their head down and write and publish a book. So when did the sort of here's how I express myself in my world in these two different ways, when did the book part begin to be something you felt called to?
Yeah, so in 2012, when I took over that job at One Life for small groups, if you can imagine, we rapidly grew our small group. When I joined staff, there was what they call 18 life groups, small groups. Within 2 years, we had 72. So this really was a
different than the growth by
very different than the house church network growth. So we saw explosive growth. Like by the peak of our group ministry, we had 72 small groups or life groups with over 800 people just in groups alone. And I'm not talking about Sunday attendance. I'm talking about people that are grouping together in living rooms across our metropolitan region, in people's groups, living rooms, and homes. Like this, it felt very movemental. It felt like things were happening. Well, I was looking for any and all ways possible to communicate and train these leaders. So every one of those 72 groups has a leader, most of them co-leaders, because we were really working this kind of multiplication scheme or schematic. And so I'm just looking for any way to instill, communicate, encourage, equip, train these group of leaders. And so I was constantly writing these blogs. In fact, it's almost like a joke. And it was just like, and that was not the only way. That was just one vehicle through which we were training. We had online courses, we had in-person trainings, we had we had coaching structures, we had all sorts of things we were working. But one of those vehicles was the written word. Because, 2:00 on a Tuesday afternoon, most of your group leaders are working. Yeah. So what are you going to do with your time, right? Yes. And so I was creating and generating a lot of content. Well, when we called our annual groups gathering with all of our leaders, there's like 120 people in the room. It's a very exciting time. And I cast this vision for shifting our groups ministry. In fact, we called it the shift to be more of this missional mindset. One of our leaders pulled me aside and said, "Did you come up with all of that content on your own? Like the vision that we casted and these 3 shifts that we called for?" And I was like, "Well, it was certainly informed by a lot of things and other people, but yeah, it's my original content." And he's like, "You have that written down somewhere?" And I was like, "Do I ever? I got
should read my diary."
Yeah. So he said, "You know what? What if we try to put this into a book format?" Sure. So we worked together over the next 6 months, and we wrote a book called Group Shift. It was really a love letter to our group leaders.
I think Shift Happens was already taken, right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. There's a reason I didn't help you write a book.
That wouldn't play. We published this book called Group Shift, self-published it. It ended up getting picked up by an actual publisher, Group Publishing. And we got published. And after that, I started incorporating writing into the daily flow of my life. So I also read, I think I've shared with you before, maybe even on here, I can't remember in our conversations with Perry, but I saw in Stephen King's book on writing, he said, if you've always wanted to be a writer, you need to develop the discipline of writing 1 page a day. He said, if you write 1 page a day, which is achievable even for people who have other vocations, you can write a 365-page book every year for the rest of your life. He said, even if half of what you write is absolutely terrible, that's still a 365-page book every day, or every other year for the rest of your life. And all of a sudden, that just opened up for me like, oh, that is achievable. So I've incorporated writing into the flow of my life. So I try to get 5 pages a week, or 5 pages a week with a couple of days off for rest. But yeah, I've just incorporated the rhythm of my life, and it's been successful.
And now you've published 4 more books?
4 more, 6 if you count my dissertation.
Let's count it.
Yeah, so 6.
Half a dozen.
6 publications. Yeah.
And the most recent one was 2023, which is Neighborhoods and Jesus.
Correct.
As of right now, which, correct me if I'm wrong, has also been picked up by a larger publisher and is in the process of being maybe repackaged, maybe retitled, and republished in 2025.
Yeah, that's correct. 100 Movements picked it up, but it is a hybrid publishing company. So, it's funny. I've gotten very good at self-publishing, but for whatever reason, for all the reasons, I really wanted to give this one a go. So Neighborhoods and Jesus represented 12 years of practicing this work, neighborhood revitalization. It represented actual dissertation, like sociological research, like real research, which I just wanted to share this life experience, these practices and this research. I wanted to get out to a wider audience than the 73 books I normally sell when I self-publish, And so for the first time since Group Shift, I really tried to get it published. And I kept getting this response back from literary agents and publishing companies. What's your platform? And having got off social media almost 5 years ago completely, I don't have a platform. And so I kind of was defeated a little bit, but I got connected to this hybrid publishing company called 100 Movements, who exists just for authors like me who don't have a platform. They picked it up. I was their first ever crowdfunding campaign. We killed it, crushed it. We raised the entire money that it takes for the editing process in 5 days, and we were going to do a 4-week. We created content for a 4-week campaign.
And you could scrap it or save it for something else or something. Got
it done in 5 days, thanks to just the amazing network of relationships that I've been blessed to develop here in our region. And so I'm going through the editing process. The hope is that the book will be published on August 1st. In fact, I just got my first round of edits back last night.
Really?
Yeah.
You're like, why did I schedule this podcast interview? I got to review these edits.
No, my wife said, why haven't you? I haven't even looked at the edits yet. She's like, I could not have sat on them. I'm like, I knew Thanksgiving break was coming up. I have a lot of space and time.
You are disciplined, and that has served you well. And is it accurate to say that the 12-year period that you're talking about is some of your vocational and missional shifts since where we sort of left off your story a little bit ago? So where you're employed now full-time at a church, and then there are a couple other shifts, and then COVID.
Yeah. There was a moment, and I want to be very careful how I talk about the church that I work for,
absolutely.
Because I genuinely am so thankful for them. And one of the best gifts they ever gave me as a young leader, they allowed me to lead and construct my life and work however I wanted. And they empowered and equipped and resourced me to do that.
Yeah.
And Brett's leadership.
There was a reason why they brought you in, what they saw in you.
And they totally let me do it. Like, there was no constrictions. I've learned that other people don't have the freedom that I was given, and the agency that I had in constructing my own workflow. Like, man, it's just nothing but love for them and the role that they played in my life. And Natalie and Brett have been such gifts to me. So I just want to be careful. But to tell truth, there was a moment. So when the group's initiative thing had kind of fallen, or however you want to call that, failed, whatever, they didn't want to lose me. They loved me, but I felt like my time there was maybe running in and in. And so Brett and I were meeting every Monday, kind of like thinking through what would be next for me within One Life. But there was a moment where I realized that we were using the same word in 2 very different ways.
Interesting.
And it changed, like...
What word?
Missional.
Oh, okay.
So when he was saying missional, he meant bringing people into a church service to then preach the gospel, or to apologize for Christianity, or to be missional with the service.
Sure.
a Sunday morning.
Sunday-centric.
Yeah. And what I meant by missional was utilizing the Sunday service to train, equip, resource, and then send a missional people into the community. Now, I know that Brett would not exclude that also,
right.
but there's a difference between those and how you organize your workflow and how you allocate resources. And so I just realized that we were talking about missional, not in incorrect. I'm not calling even his way incorrect. I'm just saying different.
It is
different ways.
Yeah, and it's kind of curious that, you know, Sean George's mutual friend of ours has got this whole concept of being on mission, and it was almost like your missions diverted just enough, ironically, around the word mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I had that epiphany in that conversation, I was like, oh, my time here on staff.
And as Austin is wont to do, you moved things forward pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Is this when you got back into a secular, a lay person's
I did. I
job?
took the job as the Trails Coalition Director for a hot minute.
That's a local nonprofit organization that supports
Trail
biking
development.
and hiking trails in the region, which a little bit kind of back to some of your roots of being, you know, an adventurous, you know, outdoors person. You're still running all the time. And you know,
I still believe in trail development for the quality of life for human beings. But
I think it's also telling that you didn't go back to like selling flooring necessarily. There was still a missional aspect to how you would spend your days and weeks.
Well, I had also just matured in my leadership and networking. You know, when I moved back to Evansville, I had needed to rebuild my relationships. You know, I had been gone for over, 12-ish years. So I'd never been there as an adult. And so, I just needed to, by the time that time came in 2016, 17, it was just 2017. It was just, I was in a very different phase of life. And so, I had the opportunity to take that job. I actually couldn't believe I got it. But almost as soon as I took that job, I was offered a job by a friend and a mentor of mine to oversee a nonprofit's new aim of starting neighborhood revitalization. And I had been doing that work as part of my church, which we didn't even get into, which is ironic because that's all I ever do and seemingly talk about is neighborhoods anymore. But
so that was an aspect of your One Life role.
Yeah.
And then you went into the different nonprofit that was not affiliated with any sort of church whatsoever.
Correct.
Shortly thereafter, offered an opportunity to be part of another nonprofit organization that did have a Christian missional component to it as well, and pretty quickly felt like the right fit.
Oh, yeah, immediately. And so one of the things that that I had been convinced of through practicing the work by trying to mobilize Christians into it was that neighborhood revitalization or assets-based community development as an approach is a vehicle, or I don't want to say the vehicle, but a vehicle for Jesus' ministry to marginalized neighbors. So when you follow Jesus through the Gospels, he's always taking people from margins and bringing them into the center and restoring.
Falling Zacchaeus out of the tree?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a perfect example, which I use in Neighborhoods in Jesus. So, some people have the problems with the word marginalized, and I understand why. You know, you don't want to, I don't like the idea of projecting onto a group of people.
Well, and you mentioned asset-based community development, which, as I understand it, is like it juxtaposed to like a needs-based or deficits-based.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So, and I don't want to call it, I don't want to project things onto people or start from a place of need or deficit. It's the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. But sometimes you have to use words as utility. You just do. And so there are people by which the society or cultures we live in are pushed from the center to the margins. That's all I mean by it is like.
I mean, even as we were talking about this church and its evolution into no longer being a church, but now is a place where, I was about to say where ministry happened. And this is maybe not abstract, but we can talk a little bit more about what we mean by words. Like, is ministry happening in this building? Would you say? Would you use those
Absolutely.
words? Okay.
Yes.
But it's not a church that's doing that ministering in some sense.
It depends on your ecclesiology, I suppose.
And your employer, okay, that's a technical term, is not a church as well. Is that correct?
It depends on your ecclesiology, I suppose.
Okay. But it's in the community. People would understand it as a nonprofit organization that maybe has a Christian mission.
Yeah,
and they would put a church maybe and the ministry functions of a church into sort of a different category.
Yeah.
And so I guess I kind of want to tee you up to riff on that a little bit of how it works, how you've seen it work, how you've seen it not work, the continued tensions, that maybe you've experienced of being a part of a traditional church still to this day, and being a part of this rogue church, and your job by your employer is doing work that many would consider, yourself included, as ministry, and then it's just being Austin.
Yeah.
Which hat, do you think you can wear? And then I would imagine that people like me and others project all sorts of things onto you. Well, Austin is this, Austin is that. He's a member of this. He's a director of that, or he's the guy that I used to smoke weed with, behind the football field or something like that in high school.
Who's hosting poker tournament Saturday? Zach, Zach's going to come to. Yeah. Man. Maybe, gosh, it's hard to even know where to begin to riff on that. So maybe I'll start with the word ministry that you use, because you talked, as we were just having, while we were setting up the equipment, you talked about, do you see yourself as a minister or a pastor? And so a lot of times I will introduce myself as a minister of the neighborhood, PP Park neighborhood. Because the word ministry is such a beautiful word in the New Testament. So it's diakono, so it's usually used in conjunction with the liturgy, or that way of service too. So service and ministry are kind of seen as these similar concepts that were done by the priest, the Levitical priest. And the role of the Levitical priest was to help the people of God, to usher them into the presence of God. So it helped them move from this everyday experience that they're having, whether it's in the farm or, in the marketplace or whatever, and then lead them through a process or an order of service through which the priest is helping them.
Is the liturgy?
Yeah, it's the liturgy. It's helping them experience God or go into the presence of God. And so then the beautiful thing that happens in the New Testament is, as we are the priesthood of believers, as the Spirit of God, now the presence of God indwells in the ministers themselves, we help usher others into the presence of God simply by being present and being with them and belonging. And so I absolutely think of myself as a minister. In fact, in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, it talks about us. We are called ministers of reconciliation. And so we've been given that gift of God to be the reconciling force that brings people together. And that's our entire job. And we can't play that role unless we're with the people we're ministering to. I always say Jesus never left the missional frontier. He didn't go into his C-suite and design programs that then he gave people to. That's not what he did. He never left the missional frontier. His way of creating a revolution or movement was to bring a group of people with him. And so when you talk about the church, unfortunately in America, we've inherited a lot of traditions and systems that are very inset. I mean, you could go back to the denominational splits of the Reformation, or you can go all the way back to when Constantine, wedded Christianity with the Roman Empire. Like, it doesn't really matter where you go, but the point is we've inherited a system and structures of beliefs that are very, very, very hard to operate outside of and see. For example, you mentioned the word pastor.
Yeah.
You know how many times in the New Testament the word pastor is used as a role? instead of a verb?
No idea.
Twice. 2 times. So why do we call these organizational leaders pastor?
Just kind of blows off the tongue. It just
no, it doesn't. We've inherited a system of understanding that uses it. Like, and in fact, in Ephesians 4, it says there were 5 gifts given to the local church to build them up and equip them for ministry. And it's the apostles, the evangelists, the shepherds, the prophets, teachers. So there's actually 5 gifts from Christ, of which the pastor or the shepherd is one. Why did we put that one in the lead role? Like, that, it doesn't make any sense. Well, we know why. And it's because we've inherited this shepherd teacher system that has been part of the Western church. It's part of the Enlightenment. It's part of Christendom, as you'd call it. But this sounds like a different conversation.
No, I really appreciate how your mind and your keep coming back to expression. Your expression of faith does go into these larger, more abstract, historical, context, as well as the very specific context of the life you live in this neighborhood. You could walk to this church, you know these folks, you've been in this building. Yeah. I think what might also be interesting, just thinking of the context of this recorded conversation being on YouTube and some of the meaningful conversations that we've had. Let's start with Jordan Peterson.
Okay.
Like, where did the Jordan Peterson moment first start to come on your radar, and how has it had any sort of effect on you, and maybe where you've gone since then?
Well, I mean, you introduced me.
Was it me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was not teeing that up. I wasn't sure.
No, you were, yeah. And so I didn't know all the hubbub. Like, all I went in is immediately started listening to his original, low-grade quality lectures when he's, is beardless and, and just devouring that stuff. Like, and then...
was it his biblical lectures or the classroom?
Is like classroom.
Okay.
And then, of course, I got exposed to the whole controversy with the gender, with the pronouns stuff, sure, which, I can take or leave that stuff. But I will say the free speech kind of underlying, the foundational things that he was talking about from the free speech perspective and all of that, I really clicked with a lot of that. And then, of course, I read 12 Rules, and there was a lot of in there with just the kind of what I would call the healthy masculinity that's missing from a lot of our culture now. And so I really clicked with a lot of that. Gosh, and then the biblical lectures, another conversation we could have sometime, my pet project, or pet the reflection is around hermeneutics. The art and science of interpretation is just fascinating to me. How can 2 people read the same verse of the Bible or scripture and have 2 wildly different, applications of that or appropriations of that same verse?
And now my mind is basically the point where, how could 2 people read the same thing and actually think the same
thing?
Right. It's like everyone's got a perspective, everyone's got a bias, everyone's projecting something into it. So we maybe should have that conversation.
I love hermeneutics, reflecting on it, the art and science of it.
Well, even like talking about Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, their initial conversations, just like, wait, you said truth. Oh, is this true? Like, they spent an hour and a half, quibbling over the definition of truth.
Yeah, and in my mind, that's all just hermeneutics. I mean, it's just all how people received information. So Hermes was the god, the messenger god, where he would take the messages from Zeus and the other Olympian gods, and he would take it to humanity. But they say Hermes is a trickster. And so Hermes' role was to take the truth and make sure humans would get it. But on the way, he would come up with his own devices. And so I love that illustration or analogy for the process of interpretation that comes from the data or the datum that is the text, and what happens when a person goes to actually live that out. Back to Francis Schaeffer's, how shall we then live? Because words are just data. They're not actually anything until you try to appropriate them into your life.
We've talked about John Vervaeke, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, have you been up to date on John Vervaeke's semi-recent experience and apprehension of a spirit called Hermes?
No.
Really?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. We'll
really
link to this
need
here.
to
But so he is somewhat famously not Christian, but completely fine with turning people on to a Christian rootedness, rehoming themselves in whatever their faith tradition that they were sort of brought up in is. And and Jordan Peterson, for that matter, have been a part of a lot of people returning or finding a home in Christianity. But for him, it's still, he's not calling himself a Christian now. He may never. But he's recently started to share publicly a very real experience he's had of Hermes.
Huh. Yeah. No, I will check that out for sure.
Okay. So the Jordan Peterson phenomenon, exposed us to a bunch of different kinds of thinkers, and so I did not. I went and got my master's in organizational psychology. That's been a decade and a half ago as well. I have not stayed in the sort of academic world, especially the ministerial or divinity world that you dove into. So I'm wondering how you have gravitated towards or rejected some of these folks within the sort of Jordan Peterson intellectual dark web, kind of world that has sprung up around him. Now we're, towards the end of 2024, and it's been several years now.
Yeah, I just always have to come back to being so grateful for the opportunities that mentors or professors or teachers along the life journey gave me. So, like, this kind of like strict, legalistic, literalist interpretation. Well, I actually think interpreting the Bible literally includes the art and science of interpretation, metaphor, literary genres, original context, that whole thing. But as people perceive literalist interpretations of Scripture, I just was able to avoid all that. And the professors and teachers and mentors that I had navigated me around. And so a guy that I got exposed to very early on, to amazing people in the leaders in biblical interpretation, Pete Enns and Scott McKnight. One of them has a book called The Sin of Certainty.
Pete, yeah.
I love that book. And so that's just a long way to say I just so much enjoy these conversations. David Bentley Hart is a Greek Orthodox thinker. I think probably the most brilliant Christian theologian mind that we have. It took me 2 tries to get through his doctoral work, his dissertation, Beauty of the Infinite. But man, is such robust theology and reflection there. He wrote a hilarious book called Atheist Delusions, where he just takes all those those New Age atheists to task and asks them to debate him. And he is a little pompous and arrogant. It comes across that way. I don't know him personally, but some people can't stomach him. But he's just such a rich thinker, and he's a Christian. I guess you'd say Christian universalist, understanding that all things will be redeemed through Christ. So it's not a universalist in the purest sense that all religions are okay, but that Christ will redeem all things. Whether it's someone who would, a lot of people would call that a heretical way of thinking. I find a lot of beauty and joy and thought in reflecting on that and minimally. Well, same thing with all these conversations that you've turned me on to, and this kind of Vervaeke, Peterson, like all these guys, Jamie Wheel, there's just so much beauty in those that I find I would be a lesser person if I did not reflect on these writings. And I'm a more whole person because I haven't been exposed to them. And so they're just a gift. And that's how I see all these lists.
Well, we went a lot of different places. I feel the need to kind of, bring us home and kind of wrap up. We talked about who you are, and the most exciting thing that you have coming isn't the book, but is your first grandchild.
Yes.
So grandpa, granddad, I think you were talking about that with a friend before we started. So how has how has that been as you're in this Advent season, which we talked about just in these very pews, the anticipation of what's coming, the anticipation of that role change, in your life or your daughter's life, like.
Yeah, it comes at a very interesting period of my life of like, I'm recognizing I'm 43, so I'm squarely in midlife, right? Like, and that just comes with a lot of reflection on what has come before and what you want to take into the future, and realizing also that what came before isn't what will take you into the future. That's like a business principle for small business growth, but it's also true of your life. And so, just feeling very much that I'm in this liminal season, this land in between space that I'm not trying to force anything. I've been an achiever for most of my life, a performer, and I'm trying to just allow space to be. Probably for the first time in my life, there's this book in my book club. The main character is also going through midlife, and he calls it the existence period. And I don't yet know what will come. I don't want to plan on what Austin the grandpa will look like or be.
I like that answer.
I just want it to be, and I want it to emerge, and I want to be present, and I want to allow those moments to shape who I become. And that's just where I'm at now. And it's I don't know, maybe that connects with some people, or maybe it's, my 25-year-old self, or certainly 32-year-old self, would have eye rolled at that. Like, yeah, it sounds like a cop out. It sounds like a cop out, buddy. Where's your vision? Where's your drive?
Sure.
Where's your achievement? what are you shooting for? What do you want your legacy to be?
Wow. Yeah.
And some of that is always going to be in there for me, but at least for now, I just want to be okay with where I am and allow whatever's next to emerge faithfully. So that's where I am today. I'm excited about being a grandpa. I'm not excited about the situation through which produced that reality. So that's been an interesting journey.
Sure. It's always messy.
This wasn't a, hey, we're having a baby, let's have celebration thing from, my daughter who's married to, it was, oh, whoop, my 18-year-old daughter's pregnant. And so there's been some issues with that, but I think a much better place now than I was 8 weeks ago when I first told you this, or 9 weeks ago on that. So I don't know. I don't know if that was a satisfactory answer.
Well, it's just I think what's encouraging for me is that I remember-ish when you sort of pulled away from social media and kind of said, I'm going to live my life a little more privately. I'm not going to sort of play that game. And not necessarily that you're playing the game again, publishing the book, but just that you understand the value in that and being open and having a recorded, conversation about whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think
I would like to say this though about that. I got off social media almost 5 years ago to keep the relationship with my oldest daughter intact. I was finding myself hardening my heart towards her on what I was seeing on social media, a persona that she was projecting. And I was like, I made the conscious choice. It wasn't to be more private. It was the conscious choice to only interact with my daughter as a real person, not as a social media persona. And it immediately healed our relationship. Or I don't think she had
on your side.
Yeah. And then what I found was I did not miss that. And so I never re-engaged. And so like the idea of thinking what I need to post or curating my life to present these things, I didn't miss any of that. And I wasn't in deep, for the record. I wasn't some sort of social media influencer by any means. I only really was active on the X platform. So anyways, but yes, I had to jump back in there to do the crowdfunding campaign, and it was an awesome experience. Like it was the beautiful side of social media.
Right.
I got so many affirmations and words of encouragement for people that I hadn't seen in 20 years, like that gave generously to seeing this thing get done. And it was for a good cause too. Like the neighborhood work that we're doing, I believe is transformative and impactful, beyond my words or my book. Like what we're doing is affecting the lives of real people in a positive way. And we have lots of testimonials that would affirm that. And so
go ahead and plug it right now. What's the website that they could check out for Community One's website?
Oh, yeah. You can go see Community One and Love Your Neighborhood, although I think it might be a hidden page. So.
Okay. Well, hopefully
you could check out Community One and get in contact with us. Yeah, and you could implement a Love Your Neighborhood initiative tomorrow at the extremely low cost of. But yeah, I mean, we are coaching and consulting, and so the work that we do in a neighborhood has already multiplied into 4 others, and we might add a 6th one soon, and maybe with the publishing of the book that will go globally through 100 movements, maybe we'll be able to do it in hundreds of neighborhoods across the world. That'd be really cool. But yeah, so I've seen this kind of redemptive side, and I don't know yet what my ongoing engagement with social media will be, but I'm in a liminal space on that as well. But I did see a redemptive side to it that I was glad to get exposed to. And just as a, final thought on that, like I am a disciple of Jesus, and I try to order my way of life in following him. And if I ask the question, where would Jesus be if he was incarnated today? I do have to say that he would be on social media, because that's where people are. And Jesus was always where people are. And so I took a season off, and for now, I know that I have to step back into it to some degree. I don't yet know what that looks like.
So if someone wanted to engage with you further, the Instagram, is it X, both, Facebook? Where would they find you?
Probably the best way to do it would be through Facebook. Sad to say. But I did keep a Facebook account for work, and so I do check it about twice a week in connection with our work in TP Park neighborhood. That's the only one I'm currently checking even semi-regularly. But you could also get on Community One's website or reach out to Zach, my very good friend, who I'm in regular communication with.
I can help you find Austin if you really want to find him.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, cool. Well, I'm hoping that people are excited to meet you and get to know you. They won't get to know you as well as I have. We didn't even talk about the crazy men's retreat stuff. You'll have to watch that video with Harry some other time. But I'm proud of you. I'm happy to have you as a friend and a brother, and glad we could share this. And
well, I just thank you for the conversations that you have in our community with Estuary, that you've been led the men's retreats. You have been an important voice in our community for a very long time, and I just thank you for you continuing to step into those spaces, create dialogues and conversations that are much needed. So, and I know Thomas is part of that too. So.
Yeah. Shout out to Thomas producing this right now. So, all right, let's hug.
All right, I'm down for that.
I love you, man.